safe, right? Out, not in public, sort of quarantine still, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
stuck at home.
Good, good, good. Well, for now,
Yeah.
For now, hopefully not too long, but
All
we'll
right,
see.
for now. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. All right, all yours.
Well, first we want to thank
Okay.
you for working with us and communicating with us, and definitely with Carvin's help, we definitely really appreciate all of that.
Good.
And we wish we could be there in person, but we do what we can for this. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a little bit of time on Mother's Day with you two. It's a great opportunity to kind of share some thoughts and ideas. And this work is important, and I appreciate you being intentional with highlighting that. So this is appreciated. So thank you, Shuvi.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your position with the City of Rochester.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a step in the right direction, and we look forward to building on some things.
Yeah. I know Mary and I, Miranda, Mary and I, we live in Rochester, in the Rochester area. So we understand that this position is really important. So I was just wondering, how did all of that come about?
So specifically with the position of the Chief Equity Officer for the City of Rochester, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have been having some conversations with the mayor before sort of my exit from Brockport. And what I realized is that specifically, if the college's efforts to become more diverse and more inclusive and to increase the number of faculty and staff amongst our employee ranks of diverse groups, to increase those same numbers amongst our students as well, to increase student numbers as well, that it's going to be truly a collaborative effort, which means how are we being intentional with reaching out to the community, specifically where we know the communities who are diverse, and making sure that we are working with them not only when they arrive to the college in order for them to be successful, but what is it that we are partnering with them on now to help them to be successful even before they arrive to the college, so that we are establishing these pipelines, if you would, so that we are reaching out to the local regional and area high schools specifically, and working with them as they are juniors and seniors to start seeing if we could get sort of an early entry program where some of their juniors and sophomores even could take some of our classes, or have one of our faculty member commit to teaching a class at each of the high schools, so that we are establishing that connection first with the students before they even arrive to the campus. They actually will arrive to the campus already having college credit accredited to their transcripts as they've completed some of these classes during their high school years. And so in order to do that, the work must not just be done by the superintendent of the area schools, not just by the principals and the students themselves, but it's imperative that our leaders recognize the value in saying, I need your voice on these efforts. I need you to be a stakeholder in these efforts. And so what I appreciated about those earlier discussions is that I reached out to the mayor and to many different leaders, public and state officials and K through 12 officials, to really establish those partnerships. And so when this opportunity happened, when I exited the college, it was other opportunities that were coming forward across the state, across the nation, in many different areas. But one of the things that I really recognized early on is that the work is very needed here. The work is of not just about race, but inclusion is beyond just race. Inclusion is actually a component of making sure that we are creating places and atmospheres and environments for everybody. And so looking at every governing structure, every board, every cabinet, every executive leadership team, and making sure that there are representation from different genders and races and cultures and identities and age groups. And so really making sure that I had begun that work with the mayor and impressed upon her the value and importance of that as the college's CEO. There was an immediate discussion about not only does Brockport need these efforts, Rochester need these efforts. The school district of Rochester need this support. The 18 other colleges within the region of Rochester need this support. And clearly, because of the great impact that the work had, not only at our college, but in the community and across the state, there was a true value in saying, what can we do and what can we consider to have you continue that work, even if it's at a larger scale, to make sure that we are all growing to be better than what we thought we were. And so having some of those preliminary discussions, it was an opportunity that seemed like a very good fit to continue the work that had been started at the college, but to actually use the work at the college as a building block to a much larger goal, to spread that work to a much larger region. So fast forward 3 months later, I am the City of Rochester's Chief Equity Officer.
Awesome. Well, congrats. That's very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
So like looking back at a year ago, did you ever expect to be working for the City of Rochester like this?
I didn't expect to serve in this capacity, but what I did expect to continue to do is to build the critical partnerships with the City of Rochester.
Right.
What I do know is that if any of this work is to be more or to improve or to increase, then we're going to have to establish partnerships. So the City of Rochester says that there is a commitment to inclusion and diversity and creating a voice for all people, making sure that people have a place at the table, looking at our policies and our laws, etc. Well, the College of Brockport said the same thing. And so what I realized is that if we are two organizations that have aligned interests and aligned values, then why are we operating in our isolated silos versus working together to say, what can we do to accomplish these things that we both say are important to us? And so I realized that there was a strong desire for that need working, already being established within the city. But what I found is that when I would get calls to come and do trainings and come and do presentations and work with the school districts within the Rochester area, working with the boards within Rochester area, of the K through 12 and other college sectors, what I found is that it was not necessarily, at least in Rochester, that there was a lack of desire for the work. What I found is that there were many people who did not have the knowledge, the skill sets, or the experience to actually be able to effectively lead the work. And so in the opportunity with the mayor, and you saying a year ago, did I see myself? I didn't, but what I did see is that there was a desire and a true value for the work. And so building from that point, I think it was important. I think it was a good move on behalf of the city to say, let's bring in people who we know have demonstrated experience, successful experience in helping to build this work. Not only talking about it, but what are the strategies that have been proven effective? What are best practices for recruitment? What are best practices for reviewing our policies? What are the best practices for retention efforts? And how are we using these efforts together to develop a culture for the city that actually bleeds out into the suburbs, that helps us to say, this is not just the City of Rochester, this is not just Brockport, this is all of our duty. And this is what we're going to do together to make it happen.
Incredible. We've been doing a lot of research, both Alyssa, Miranda, and I, and we've followed a WDKX interview that you had. And you talked a lot, you gave a lot of knowledge about systemic change and like working with Rochester and local community. Can you talk more about that?
I can. So what I have found in my research is that the City of Rochester has one of the highest poverty rates in the country. But if you look within the City of Rochester's region, as I stated a moment ago, there are about 19 colleges within this small area. And so colleges provide us with both the qualifications, the experience, the credentials to actually be qualified to do the job. And so what I saw is that higher education is a critical component of driving the change, not only at the college, but specifically within the local economies and the diversity efforts that will help directly impact those things that we are seeing as our opportunities for growth, which is our higher poverty rates, et cetera, going forward. And so again, if we are able to look at us being the solution, us being, when I was at the college, the system who provides the credentials, the qualifications, the degrees to come out and get the job so that you are able to sustain your family and to sustain a career and to sustain the culture, so that instead of us becoming more only recognizing the challenge, we actually say, what are the solutions? And so if you only identify the challenge and you don't look at what are we doing about it, then that makes us less effective to drive the change that we say we want. And so looking at that, it's looking at how we all have a role in looking at these changes. One of the things that I also talked about is recognizing that it is never the duty or the responsibility of one area, one person, one leader, etc., who will help bring these changes that are needed to fruition. In the interview, I talked about how, I think I remember saying how slavery did not end because slaves thought it was wrong. Slavery ended because there were people who were not slaves who stood up and said, we too say these practices are wrong. And it's showing the power of change. There are a lot of opportunities for us to sit down and look at how we're so different and how there is limited ways that we can align our values. Quite frankly, I disagree with that. As unique and different as we are, before we are different, before we are any of our interests, our religions, our cultures, our preferences, we are all first people. And so recognizing that as a true component of what is critical to saying, before we look and saying, it's your job, it's my job, it's her job, it will never be successful. It must become the job of everyone. It must become the highest ranking official. It must become the person who is not at the highest area on the totem pole, to really understand how it's never going to be successful if it becomes their job or my job. It has to become our job. And so a lot of that focus was looking at that and looking at ways to look at how are we holding ourselves accountable. So we say, what's my part? How should I be contributing? What's my area of expertise? Because there is an opportunity for everybody to have a duty and a space to say, this is my part. As a male, I recognize that there are injustices that are placed upon, inequities and placed upon women daily. Daily there are. And so if I only state that, okay, I recognize the challenges that are provided to people of specific genders or sexualities, then I myself, gender or sex, I myself am going to say, yeah, I'll support you from afar. I agree. But what I have to do is to recognize that identities and cultures that I may support, I don't have to be a part of that culture or that identity to support them. And it doesn't make me less. It doesn't make me compromise my own culture. It doesn't make me value my own identities less. I can step out and say, as a member of a specific faith, I can go and sit in a service of another faith and still be rooted in my own faith, but show them that there is an intentional emphasis of saying, I can have a place at the table, but so can you. And so that's important for recognizing the true impact of sustainable inclusion, so that it's not just an ideal or something that we place on our documents or on our web pages or at the top of our marketing materials. What does that look like? How do you operationalize that so that every community member understands the value and impetus and what that feels like and experienced like by all of its constituents? And so I think that was a critical focus of recognizing that it can't just be the people who are putting programs in place every day. It can't be just people who are of certain communities who are attending the events, because quite frankly, it's the people who are not attending those events that actually need the most education and resources and knowledge most. And so how are we really making the expectational changes that it's not just for some, but that this work must be embodied and flourished among all of our duties and responsibilities?
Yeah. So I've lived in Rochester my whole life, and I know that different areas have so many different cultures and so many different people. So I was just wondering, on the topic of diversity, race, and inclusion, what are your biggest concerns for Rochester and Brockport?
So I would say that, so I have this knowledge or this view for me that Dr. Archie has a challenge with any governing structure that's 100% of anything. Let me say that again. So that means if our hiring board is 100% women, if our people who write our policies are 100% men, if our people who decide on our budgets are 100% African American, if our people who police the laws for law enforcement are 100% white, any area, whether it's at the college or it's in the city, period, that governs and makes decisions that impact all of us, but the people who make the decisions of what that looks like is only representative of one culture or one identity or one group, that you don't have the ability to effectively consider how the laws, the practices, the policies you are writing and creating are going to impact different people. And so this is where I would say, when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, when it comes to identity, when it comes to faith, when it comes to disability, when it comes to what area of the military, a veteran, all of these groups have totally different identities, the way that they have experienced life, from the economic status to being a part of the lower socioeconomic class to the middle class to the higher class. They're all different. So therefore, when we make decisions that impact all, then how are we confirming and making sure that these people and their cultures and their existences, their histories, are reflected among the decision-making bodies that we have in place? Because that's how you begin to create the change. Because that not only shows that we're making policies that are considerate of the people that we're asking to support them, but what it also shows is that we are considering how this will impact the people that will live it every day, and not doing reactionary, not passing the laws and coming back and saying, oh, we should have considered that because we didn't have that view at the table. But this creates the expectation in the beginning, if the governing structures and if our leaders have these values, and the people who we have placed our faith and confidence in creating governing structures that are equitable and processes that impact us all, then it will also be representative of it being a value of the leaders. So when our leaders go out and say we value it, it's important, and yet we turn around and we look at the structures at the college or the city that these people are leading, and it's not reflected, our actions sometimes speak so loud that people cannot hear the words that we say. And so it's hard for people to be able to be a true supporter of the work and of the policies and of the procedures that we are making when their very existences were not even considered as they were developed. And so this is where the work must start with our leaders, so that the people who are in place can help drive the decisions that show we will be more than what we have been. And I don't want it to be perceived that we won't make mistakes, right? Because that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to be in the natural, in the flesh, if you would, to recognize that as a person, Dr. Archie has implicit biases. We each have our own implicit biases based off of the communities, the cultures, the identities, the family structures that we've all had. And so we must be intentional with saying, how am I taking the opportunity to learn of others so that I am engaging in ways that could be supportive and actually respect and value the lives of all people, not just only those that I choose to affiliate with or have certain aligned interests in.
Definitely. To shift gears just a little bit, I'm curious to hear what your experience was as a CDO at a SUNY school.
I have to say, so my experience at the College of Brockport specifically, I have to say, when it came to dealing with community members, with students, with faculty and staff, was phenomenal. I have to say, I was so grateful that one of the things that I feared, and I became very intentional with, is that I didn't want to become the people of color's champion only, right? I didn't want people to have this perception that, oh, Dr. Archie is here to support, Hispanic and African American and Indian American or Native American, or all that's what he's here for them. That small silo would never drive change. And so what I made sure that I did is that when I walked in public, because I remember having conversations with leaders at the college where I intentionally asked them, as a person who was white, when is the last time you publicly walked across the campus with someone who was not? When has our constituents on campus seen you engage with someone of a different gender, of a different possible sexuality, of a different ability status, etc.? And I said, let me tell you why that is so important. Because you are sending a message, even though you are not aware, you're sending a message. If Dr. Archie only walked and engaged and always spoke to only people of color, then the message that could have been received and interpreted is Dr. Archie is here for those groups of people only. And so again, recognizing and understanding that my work had to be more than only supporting and visually emphasizing the value of people of color, but it was of all people. And so what I can say is at the College of Brockport, that was one of the things that I became very focused and intentional on, is saying, how are my actions demonstrating and aligning with the words that I say that I'm about? And so I engaged with faculty and staff of different genders and communities and races and veteran status and abilities and communities of faith and age groups, all of these things, because my responsibility was to people, to all people. And so at the college, I will say that amongst the college stakeholders, I cannot convey enough how grateful I am to have had those meaningful experiences, to have had the hard conversations with students, to have the difficult conversations with our faculty on how are we aligning our curriculum to actually reflect the people who are sitting in the seats. So that as we're teaching about diversity and we're teaching about equity and we're teaching about inclusion, the people who are in our classrooms are who are our primary stakeholders, which are our students, can see themselves culturally relating to what it is that we're teaching. And so that's how you're able to impress upon people the recognition of, we see you, we identify you, and we embrace who you are, because who you are, as you are, is enough. And so recognizing that impetus, recognizing the courage that it took to lead that, it was my privilege to lead these efforts at the college. I cannot say that it was done solely by Dr. Archie. Absolutely not. It was done by Dr. Archie being willing to step up and lead it and challenge structures in place that were so accustomed to the way things were. But it took the people themselves, which I am so glad to have had the opportunity to work with, to stand up and say, we see this and we want to be better and we can be more. And so that experience was one that I will always value. I have to say that I was only at the college 2.5 years. And in that 2.5 year time frame, during the completion of my second year, I got a call from an organization up at the State University of New York, Albany, the administration's office. And it was the University Faculty Senate president. Now, that's very distinct because within the hierarchy of a college, there is the faculty side of the house, and then there is the staff administration side of the house, right? They're two separate entities. They often don't collaborate on things because they want to make sure that their respective needs are supported and heard. So when I got a call, because at the college, I was a staff and administrator. When I got a call from the University Faculty Senate president, who subsided over all of the SUNY institutions. So which means University Faculty Senate had the responsibility to developing policies, recommendations that impacted every one of the 64 campuses statewide, period. And so when I got that call, she said, listen, Dr. Archie, I want you to understand, this is not a role that we have ever in history of Faculty Senate had someone who is not a faculty lead. But we would like for you, because of the recognition that you have brought to that college, because of the calls that we have received, because of the faculty themselves believe in the work that you've led at the college, because of the students, because of the community members, and everyone showing us that the leadership that you have brought in this area has been so effective, we would like to have you be that very same leadership role over all faculty senate, so that the decisions that you help make and lead at the college, we want all 64 institutions to reflect that very same integrity in which you've led. And so what I can say is, being a minority male, being invited to have this huge opportunity, not just to drive change at Brockport, but to drive change throughout every one of the SUNY institutions, was so humbling to me that will be, I will never forget that. And so this is where I can say that experience is one that has been one that will forever leave a residue in my mind and my heart, because I can never fault the college itself, nor can I fault the SUNY system itself for the challenges experienced by local leaders. And so it's unfortunate that our leaders lacked the courage and they lacked the integrity to want to become more. And that's unfortunate. But what I can say most is that the honor above it all came from the people every day who said, we will be more, and our history will not be repeated. And that's change. And that's what made my job so memorable, working for both the College of Brockport itself and SUNY system as a whole.
I can definitely say that the work speaks for itself just because of the protests that have been going on and the events on campus, and even the community's response. Like, I think it's huge. Why do you think it is that it caught such news value?
I think it has, and I can't say that it's specifically because of me. I'd say it's the, as you said, the impact of the work. The impact of the work. So many people, so diversity, equity, and inclusion have been things that since the 50s and 60s, people have been trying to say they champion, and it's now a priority and a value. But what was recognized is that we had become so much more in a shorter time of 2 years versus the decades and decades of protests and challenges and policies and hate crimes and biases that are documented in classrooms, and most of our faculty and our staff being exclusionary to one group or one race or one gender. And what it had become an expectation of optimism and hope. It gave hope. There's so much division currently right now. There is so much division and focus on where we are different, and that is a part of it. But if we look at diversity as documenting our differences only, then we will all stay alienated from one another for the rest of our lives. We have to put as equal of an emphasis on how different we are by also articulating the many, many, many ways in which we are bonded, we are common, and we are the same. One of the things that I've been documenting, and I'm certain you've seen it and heard of it, is even looking at Corona, right? Corona doesn't know your race. Corona doesn't know your gender. Corona doesn't know your sexuality, your ability. Corona does not discriminate. And so what we found is that there are things that impact all of us, some of us even more. There are certain groups who have had certain things happen to them in greater and larger numbers. But the thing is, at the end of the day, just like cancer, it doesn't have a preference on what your skin tone is or what your socioeconomic class is. It comes for us all. And so if we only sit and identify and highlight the so many ways that we are different, we will never focus on the impact of the power of identifying how things that impact you also impact me. And so what I do know is that I feel that the reason why there's been so much attention and there has been so much interest in this topic is because it wasn't just one community. It wasn't just the white community who was frustrated by this. It wasn't just the African American, the veteran, the military, the Jewish, the disabled. It was people who said, I am a white heterosexual male, and I went to Dr. Archie, and as a white heterosexual male, he changed things for me. And so what that demonstrated is that there is no way to make this only about one people. And what he spoke about and what he taught about and what he said and what he did reflected the work that he led. And it was truly who he is, and we all saw it. And so what I appreciated most about it is that it was our work. It never was Dr. Archie's work. It was our work. And so this is why I think it gained so much attention and traction. It was very humbling to get calls from the state of New York, institutions that are there. It was great to get phone calls and emails from students across the state that said, at our campus today, we did a sit-in in your name. It was great to get calls from local leaders, from state leaders, from politicians, from community members. But what was most touching was the emails and the communications that I got from students. Not just college students, but students who were in middle school and students who were in elementary schools who said, you came to my school and you let it be known that the college at Brockport had a place for me there. And I had never had no one tell me that. I never was introduced to a minority Black male with the prefix doctor in front of his name. And just being able to hear someone like you share that with me gave me hope to know that I could obtain that. And so I think for me, it was most effective because I broke down those barriers of elitism, that I focused on making sure that our students, our employees, our faculty, and our staff know, I am just like you. Our students, I made it very clear, the same classes you sat in, I sat in. The same struggles you had, I had. The same matters or components of, I feel alone and I'm afraid and I don't know if I can make it. I had the same insecurities. Matter of fact, I have the same insecurities. But if I did it, and if I'm here with you, you can too. And it's the opportunity to give people the hope that we can and will be more. And so this is where I think that the interest of the community, the state, the city, the region, even folks from across the nation. I have received many calls from donors and alumni of the college who say, we stand with you. And so it's not necessarily standing solely with Dr. Archie, but it's the work that Dr. Archie led and people feeling that there was a place in the midst of that work for them too. And so that is what I think caused that such of a ripple effect of people saying, we see it and we don't stand.
Yeah. Are we doing good on time?
I'm good. You're good. I carved out some time. We're good.
Okay. I just want to make sure because I know this doesn't go.
I think it might be okay. I haven't got a notification. It might just keep going.
Okay.
I think it's okay.
Okay. So, yeah, I think one of the most beautiful things about the protest was that people of all races and all genders and all sexualities were there together. So was that a surprise to you that, kind of all of your work was kind of there?
What I can say is that it wasn't a surprise because these were the people that I was there for, right? These were the people that when we would have an employee whose mother or husband would pass away, I was at the funeral. I didn't just send a card or an email, I went. When our students who were first-time freshmen had never tied a tie before or had never dressed up before, and Dr. Archie, I didn't have a dad growing up. And no, these weren't all the time people of color. There were people who were students who were white who said, hey, I didn't have a dad. Don't worry about it. Come by the office, I'm gonna teach you how to tie that tie. So it was my daily impact of working on our policies, working to raise money for communities that were already less advantaged in money, working to be that person. One of the things that I learned early on in my career is that I can't always be Dr. Archie, right? Can't always be that. Because depending on the stakeholder that you're sitting with, being Dr. Archie and talking about strategic planning and outcomes and data-driven metrics, all of this stuff, which I can do. Certain people just need you to be safest. Certain people just need to see you say, hey, I've been there and I'm with you and you're gonna make it. So that meant taking off my suit and putting on a Take Back the Night t-shirt and get right in the middle of the Take Back the Night protest march, walking with groups that were mostly women and saying, nope, you don't walk alone, I'm here with you. So that I would leave my meetings with the president and leaving with the superintendents and leaving with the mayors and the SUNY personnel. And I'd come right back and say, don't think I forgot the people who this work is mostly about. And that's the people who are on the ground every day, living it and experiencing it. And so having engaged with these groups, I wasn't surprised. What I was humbled. Absolutely. Because there were people who I know typically to be very reserved and very quiet, and not ones who publicly use their voice, who I saw step up in ways that I would have never imagined as both a leader and as a person. And so those were the opportunities that really rang deep and rang true, to really know that the work was not surface level. It wasn't fake, because there's a difference between when somebody's talking to you or talking with you versus talking at you, which I'm pretty certain you all have experienced that. And so what it shows is that, no, they knew that I was listening and I was talking with them, and that the actions and the steps that I took were for the consideration of bettering us as an institution and as a people as a whole. So that was, I'd say my response to that was most humbling versus surprising.
So I know that, it was not up to you to leave Brockport, but was it hard knowing that you had to leave a campus where there were students that seemed to be experiencing no change? They were still impacted by these systematic injustices and stuff.
Well, so the short answer to that question is yes, definitively yes. And so my efforts there at the college were to address that experience, that there were not only students, but there were faculty, and there were even staff. There were community members who would come in having all of these concerns. And so as a leader, what I realized is that it's one thing to go and say, I'm gonna address this one incident that occurred. But if I am not looking at saying, so what is the policy that regulates how we respond to this incident that will make sure that this incident doesn't happen to anyone else again? And so it was being as personal enough to look at the incident, but also look at the governing policy that regulates how we respond to that incident. That was equally important, because the policy regulated how and if this incident is to ever happen again. So what it does is it makes us look at not just the lower hanging fruit of the daily interactions that happen, but what are the system structures in place that either continue to keep it allowing to have happened, or what can we change to say, change the policy, change the law that will actually change the outcome, versus us continuously handling these lower incidents, but not willing to look at the bigger problem. And so this is where I would say the systemic challenges is what I identified. And what I want you to be very aware of, I want each of you to hear me. So anywhere there is a group of people being oppressed, I want you to look around, because every time that there is anyone or a group of people being oppressed, there is someone benefiting from it. Look at slavery. Slaves were oppressed, right? Slaves weren't just oppressed because they just wanted to be oppressed. Someone was benefiting from it, just like men. So let me give an example. There is people have I've heard once say the pay equity gap between men and women. So guess who benefits from women making less money?
Men.
Right?
Men.
So anytime you see that there is an oppressed group or inequity in some place, always look around and say, who's benefiting from this? Somebody is. And so this is where we must look at, even if our institutional processes, our policies, our governing structures in place, our practices, our procedures are permeating these injustices, these inequities, these biases, we must say we commit to change. And so looking at that, this is where I am saddened, truly saddened by the people who I feel are left in harm's way because Dr. Archie is not there. I do have hope that the college will change. What I do know that although initially I was sad at the departure of mine, but what I do know is that there is now not only regional, but there is now state and there is now national attention brought to this issue, specifically at the college. So there are going to be people monitoring. People are going to now have the courage to speak up that would have never spoken up before. People are going to be willing to challenge these behaviors, whether it's permeated by our leaders or even if it's our colleagues, and say these behaviors have gone on long enough. And so what I do appreciate and what I do say, if there's any good that has come out of it, is us being all willing to say it can never be just Dr. Archie. If it is Dr. Archie's efforts alone, then we will never change. All of us must be willing, when we see these things, when we see behaviors, when we are brought these things to our attention, we must all be willing to say something and do something about it. I often give presentations, and in the presentations, I've often stated to some of our people in attendance, specifically our younger generation, I've stated to them that I owe you, and as well as each of you on this call, I owe you an apology. My generation owes your generation an apology. And the reason why that is because we depended on such great people like Martin Luther King and all of these other people to speak on our behalf because we had faith in their ability to lead it. And so they were just that, they were leaders. But we all had the duty and responsibility to say, we're going to follow up with the accountability. No, we're going to make sure that people see this is not just their expectation of all of us, but this is something we all need. And so what happened is that we didn't do our part as a generation. We didn't make it clear that this stuff cannot go on. We remained silent. And so what's happened is that now, 50 years later, you're having to deal with it because we didn't stand up and we didn't end it. And we didn't say not today. We didn't say no more. We didn't say, okay, just because it impacts me, I need to go impact somebody. I need to go make sure that these things aren't impacting others. No, we align that, say, well, those things are their issues. Those are not mine. Or those are the challenges they're experiencing, not mine. Well, just like Corona, when you leave one group out, what it ends up doing is come back and biting everybody in the butt because you let it go on and not addressed it with everyone. So this is where, again, I would say that getting back to your question, I would say that's sort of the challenges that I've had as far as the disappointment of the lack of progress that I would have liked Brockport's leaders to embody. Brockport's leaders to say, we take this on, we will do this, versus saying, it's your job to do it, and it's your job not to make us uncomfortable when you ask us to do it. And so this is where the differences in philosophical and fundamental values was more than the institution was able or willing to change to. And so I appreciate the question, but yeah, it is still hard. And hopefully in my new role as the Chief Equity Officer for the City of Rochester, I can still have some impact at the College of Brockport.
Sounds like you like saying that. Awesome. So after your termination at Brockport, there was a spiral of events. So Dr. Sandra Vasquez, she resigned. There was also an EEOC complaint about racial discrimination. Do you think this reflects Brockport as a whole?
I would say that it reflects the leadership. So it reflects the leadership's ability to accurately assess where they are. So if people are communicating repeatedly what their challenges are, and we feel, or the community feels, the students feel, the faculty feel, the staff feel that you are not listening, you are not hearing, although communicated in writing in multiple platforms and formats, the data showing that there is an escalation in the number of complaints being filed to the different reporting structures that all highlight this. The data highlights it. The reports highlight it. The climate assessment data highlights it. But if the institution's leaders don't wish for that to be known, and the response becomes one of hide and dismiss, so we're not responsible for doing anything about it, then what happens is that the constituents continue to feel like you're not hearing them. And if you don't hear them, they're going to find ways to be heard. They're going to find local radio stations. They're going to find people who are willing to hear them, because when they brought these concerns to you, when they made it infectiously valued as a part of the structure of the college that this is what matters to us, and you refuse to hear them, then you force them to say, we will be heard. And so this is where I would say the challenges as of that point were only symptoms. And let me give you what I mean by that. So Dr. Vasquez resigning was a symptom. Me being terminated was a symptom. The multiple EEOC reports were a symptom. And what I mean by symptom is apply a symptom to a cold. So if I started coughing right now, oh my God, I got a cough, and I'm just continuously coughing, I need to go out and find something to address my cough. And I'm only looking to address the cough and not realizing that the reason why I'm coughing is because I got a cold. I have a cold. I have to address the cold. And if you address the root cause, the core of something, the symptoms will dissipate. But what it is that we've been addressing our symptoms so long and not being willing or able to address the rooted challenge of what was in place. And it's that we have the historical and current climate of not being inclusive, of being exclusive, of creating an elitist mentality that people of all groups, their interests, their experiences, their histories, their lives, their values are equally reflected amongst other values that we prioritize. And so again, for me, I would say is that all of these repeated, and still coming from what I understand, others are still coming forward now. These are symptoms. It will not have change until we are willing to deal with the root systemic structures that in place that permeate these behaviors continuously to manifest. And so that's when I think that Brockport and everything else will improve, is when we say, no, the real problem is not just Dr. Archie getting removed and not just Sandra Vasquez. Let's look at the daily experiences of our students of color, within our institution structure. Where are the people of the Hispanic community reflected? Where are their voices heard or seen on campus? Where are all of these different cultures intentionally embedded into our community so that we are making decisions that consider all of the lives that are valued as our community, as we say our priorities are to. How are we making that lived experiences versus only what we document on paper? And so that's where I can say that, as you highlighted those 3 incidents, those are just symptoms. The challenge is we got to get to the root. And once you get to the root, then you drive change.
Yeah. We definitely looked up to you in many ways at your time at the College of Brockport and now. And I know a lot of my friends looked up to you. So what is one thing you would want to say to the students that looked up to you, or just the students in general at Brockport?
Well, what I can say is that as much as there is a distinction in the role between, okay, he's a CDO and he reports to the president and we're just students, please don't get it confused. Or as they say when I'm in my baseball cap and jeans and t-shirt and basketball, don't get it twisted. I am you, right? I have been through some of the similar experiences. No, I may not know any individual's unique road or path or challenges, but what I can tell you as a person, I get stressed out when my mom gets sick. Sometimes I got to worry about if I have the resources to be able to make certain things happen. I'm worried about relationships and family just as you, and to realize that I was only the leader of the word. The true measure of a leader is if you're able to take the leader out of the system and if the system still carries on the work. Because what that means is that the leader didn't make it his journey or his agenda. He or she or they are actually able to empower the people that they are working with to say, this is our work. And so what the biggest compliment that I can give in my leadership is that it wasn't just Dr. Archie's work, but it became all of our work, that everyone became compassionate and passionate about it and wanting to make space and room for other people. So what I can do is to make sure, what I do want to do is, or I do want to tell the students is, remember your part, remember your place. Remember the very same convictions that you had when we sat in these meetings and we sat together and driving policy changes, when we went to faculty senate and made them change or asked for their support in changing and evolving the curriculum, and how our students were a part of that. And although other people didn't want our students to be a part of that, specific leaders stated that they didn't want our students mattered enough for me to say, we will create a place for even our students to have a voice, that when the curriculum is taught about them, they have the ability to have their voices be a part in that decision-making process. And so these are the things that I want to say thank you for. I want to tell them, whatever you do, don't think that the work is over. You must do your part. You've got to embody and embrace it and build upon what you've already helped lead. There would have been no Dr. Archie being successful had it not been for our students. They were one of the primary focuses of my work. Not only the students, though, let me make sure I'm clear, my faculty and our staff were also people who supported it. And I'm grateful for them and all the work that they did. And just to say, stay tuned, because it's not over yet. We still have work to do.
Great. I don't have any more questions personally. If Mary or Miranda, if you guys have anything else to ask, go ahead.
Mary, if you want to go first.
Oh, but I will say we've been asking students, because this has been an ongoing project for the semester and it will probably go on throughout their senior year. We've been asking students, who is missing from the table mean to you? And we kind of gathered that from you. And I think it would kind of feel incomplete if we didn't ask you that.
So are you asking me my personal opinion on what I think about that, or what do I think it means? To me, what's the question specifically? What does it mean to me? So, I'd say that's twofold. So before we can, who's missing at the table is the very minimal benchmark. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So if I am in a meeting and I look around and every one of the persons in that room look like me, speak like me, talk like me, walk like me, come from the same background as me, the same cultural identity groups, then there is clearly many different people or many different persons or cultures or identity groups missing from the table. I'd say that's a low-level benchmark, because at least you have different ideas, interests, values, etc., reflected among the table. So that's more of a diversity spectrum, right? So you have differences reflected. Take that one step further. take that who's missing from the table analogy one step further into the area or to the vacuum of inclusion. And what I mean by that is it's possible to be diverse, yet still exclusive. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So I have a classroom filled with 40 students, and I have, 10 of this, 10 African Americans, 10 Asian community members, 10 white, 10 Hispanic, 10 Alaskan natives, etc. So we're diverse as a group. But if in that classroom, my African Americans sit exclusively together, my Caucasian students sit exclusively together in a corner and only engage with people who they know, all of my women only talk to other women, right? So that's a component of being diverse, yet still exclusive. So how can we break that exclusivity, even amongst diverse groups? But the first component is to make sure that we at least have people of differences at the table. And so once we make that first threshold benchmark of saying, at least reflected among the table, we have the different values, views, and interests of the people these things will impact. The next step is to say, all right, so how can Dr. Archie recognize that Dr. Archie may be a father with 2 sons, but there is also who may be an African-American heterosexual male with 2 sons, but there may also be a female across the table who is white, who also have 2 sons. So this is where there is a connection. Although we are different, there is still a connection because values and things that are important to me are also important to their community. So how are we building upon not just saying how diverse are we, but how are we collaborating to also see that even amongst the differences, there are still commonalities. So that's more of the focus of what is meant by that low benchmark of is, are we even creating a space at the table for these people who are not even reflected in these larger decisions that need to impact us all? So who's missing from the table is a way to really make sure that you're at least hitting that first benchmark of developing a structure, a policy, a college, an institution, a city that is truly about the work of being inclusive at its very core. And so that's what who's missing from the table means to me.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to title our, we were originally going to do a documentary, but obviously with the coronavirus and everything,
Sure.
Filming stopped. So hopefully by this fall, we can get together like a full documentary. We have a little trailer if you want to check it out.
Sure.
But yeah, we're just bummed that we couldn't get a full documentary like right now to have, but it'll come about.
Good.
This isn't over. We know that hopefully if we have class in person, I don't think this will be over. I was asked, do you think it's over, or do you think it's been brushed under the rug? And I was always like, no, I don't think topic of diversity, race, and inclusion could ever be brushed under the rug. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I want to say thank you to each of you for focusing on this. I have had, even this week, I think Channel 13, Channel 8, Channel everything has been calling, asking for an interview. You have been at least for a student group. I did something at I think it was WDKX on a radio station, but not made time to speak with the primary stakeholders who my work focused on most, and that was each of you. So I'm glad to have Carvin had been the conduit for making this happen. I appreciate you. Don't lose the zeal and the drive that you have. Things will be better. They will. They must. Because we won't be able to go on like this. We can't. So thank you for your work. I appreciate it.
We want to thank you for sticking with us through this and just being a part of it, because it means a lot to us, this topic. I think, as a group of women especially, we were afraid that, our voices were not going to be heard. So yeah, we thank you.
Call on me again if you need me anytime, specifically in my role as the City of Rochester CEO. I will be glad to come out, to support, to attend, to speak, whatever you need. You got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we wish you luck in your future, your new position. And yeah, thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon. Have a happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.